going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, maybe your mind. This could mean derision, mockery, isolation. Isolation is the gift. All the others are a test of your endurance.
Welcome to the Evolve Podcast, an open forum on personal growth and cultivating a positive mindset. I'm your host, Joe Fitzpatrick. Today on the show, we have Dave Robinson. You may remember Dave from his mention in Kendall News episode of the podcast. And I reached out to Dave as he is also a friend of mine, and I'm stoked to have him on. Dave Robinson is a master story worker and healthy holistic habits coach. While possessing a deep passion for optimization and self-improvement, Dave has been guiding friends and clients on their own personal development journeys for well over a decade. Dave is a co-host of the Get Enlifted podcast, and he also owns his own Storywork practice, helping men and women aged 20 to 80 transform their lives through reframing their personal stories, which shape their identities. Storywork is the process of transforming both our internal and external dialogue through journaling, focused breathing, and a strong emphasis on using productive language. Dave helps people overcome imposter syndrome, turn self-doubt into self-confidence, and finally face what's really holding you back, yourself. To bring this work to professional and executive level men, Dave partnered with his longtime friend and colleague, Brooks Meadows, to create Shop Club and Serious Fun, which integrates a combination of their storywork, breathwork, and movement practices into corporate workspace wellness programs. Let's go. Dave, we've known each other for I think 5 or 6 years now.
Mm-hmm.
We met initially when you were still doing Get Strapped, Stay Strapped, which eventually became GS Nation, and you were doing the personal coaching on the physical fitness side of things, and now you've transitioned your coaching into story work and helping people to redefine what stories they tell themselves about who they are, what they represent as their personal brand. Can you please just provide some more insight to the audience on who you are, what you do, what you're passionate about, and how story work has become part of your practice?
Totally. Yeah, I appreciate it. As you mentioned, we've known each other for 5 or 6 years. I was trying to think when exactly we met before this call, so I can answer this exact question if it came up, and I pegged it at 2017. I may be right or wrong with that. Early 2017. Who knows, right? Who knows? And like I imagine many people, my journey with personal development started in the land of fitness, where I found myself at a pretty young age unhappy with how I was looking. Now looking back, I can understand I was unhappy with the thoughts I was telling myself, right? And the story I was running in my head about what everybody else thought of me and what my place is in the world as a middle schooler or a high schooler or whatever it was, right? I got into fitness, and fitness allowed me in multiple different areas: soccer, powerlifting, coaching, eventually coaching fitness. It allowed me to really lean into those things that were bothering me and not necessarily deal with them, but in essence, get over them, right? Or what I thought was heal from them. And I'm air quoting for uh, podcast app listeners, non-video people. So the the big evolution was over the past couple of years where, and I went through various stages of coaching at various levels, and had a big career switch and relationship ups and downs, and moved to a foreign country, moved to Mexico to open a health and wellness retreat, and happened to have immaculate timing, as that was about 2.5 weeks before COVID and borders closed and all hell broke loose back in early 2020. So found myself back in my hometown and really again running a woe is me, life is effed, uh, you know, really victim mentality mindset, where, man, this isn't going to ever work out. Nothing works out, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And my solution for that, as it had been in the past, was to, okay, cool, I'm going to lean into fitness. I'm going to lean into the workouts. I'm going to lean into the grind. I'm going to lean into all those things. And, just really dole out or mute my problems through physical exertion and pain and the feel good chemicals that come along with that, right? This time, however, I was at this really critical junction in my life, reintroduced through a very dear friend of mine and mentor to me, Mark England, also a Richmond native. He reintroduced me back to this concept of Storywork, which something that had become the Enlifted method after 15 plus years of his refinement. What Storywork did for me personally, Joe, was to help me to really shine a light on me inside, right? Where a lot of times I had been looking to the outside for that help, or books, or exercise, or dieting, or this or that or the other, influence this, learn that, right? And for really one of the first times, or the first time in a long time, with a very specific method that made things really simple and really helped me to connect to myself and disconnect from my story, I was able to do exactly that. Disconnect from that story, disconnect from the victim mentality, help to really release a lot of those energies and shed those old limiting beliefs from past experiences. I starved out my dark wolf, started feeding my light wolf the ribeyes and the T-bones and whatnot, and ultimately found myself within a pretty short period of time really speaking about myself to myself in a totally different light, and having really processed a lot of the old traumas and hurts and pains, and saw things shift so dramatically and quickly within myself and with many of my colleagues that were going through a similar thing at the very same time, for different reasons, that I decided to go full-fledged 100% deep dive into making Storywork a huge part of my professional practice, to up to 90% of my professional practice. So that's a broad stroke, short as I can make it. I imagine I can shorten that up a bit, but hopefully that gives you a pretty decent idea of what it's been like over the past, however many years, and the emphasis now.
Right. And I definitely want to dig a little deeper into that, but just camping out here a little bit, I definitely identify with having that victim-based mindset, and, having to deal with that past trauma, that past insecurity, that, was all tied up in that. And I can imagine, having made the transitions that you have in your career, there have been a lot of questions in regards to who you are, who Dave Robinson is in terms of your identity, because, that really has defined, I think, based on my experience with you, who you are as a person, and, the values that you have, the type of work that you do, the quality at which you do it, the people you surround yourself with. I know all of that is very important to you. So I want to go back a little bit before we dig further into the Storywork stuff. So Um, at what point did you decide to stop doing your fitness coaching, which was in its final form, GS Nation?
Mhm.
Um, and then you, where did you go from there? Based on my understanding, it was from GS Nation into the retreat center in Mexico, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So um, GS Nation started to take a different turn as far as what we were really looking for was a what I really realized is that I tried to build something in essence that I didn't necessarily want or love, with the idea
Mm-hmm.
to then get it up and running and then hire people to run it, and then I can go off and do what I wanted to do, right? And that, first of all, isn't a great reason to build a business, right? From the start. And second of all, was something that was a lesson that I really had to learn and had to make sure that I, in the sense, haven't fallen back in the pattern of saying yes to the thing in front of me, even if it's not necessarily the thing that I really wanted to do. Maybe taking like smaller steps than I really um, than I could. Having some of those limiting beliefs, deciding I needed to put some things in place before I could really go and chase my big dreams, right? If that makes
Yeah.
any sense. And so, um, in between, after GS Nation, really we stopped doing the workouts, and the podcast stopped. I kept my personal training clients, and I revisited an invitation I had from August of 2019 to move to Southern California, move to the very southern tip of San Diego, and live with some other coaches in a 3 blocks from the Pacific Ocean, a mile from Tijuana, Mexico, and live in what was really a personal and professional incubator, right? A bunch of other coaches that were speaking the same language from the similar coaching stem or tree or whatever. We had all, for the majority of us, had met in uh, at previous times. We had the same vibes. We were in similar stages in the career, and it was a 6 or 7 coaches in a 3-bedroom house, where one of the beds was 2 bunk beds, or one of the rooms was 2 bunk beds. There was 4 of us in one of these rooms. I had like the top right bunk, and it was great. It was like everybody had the space and the freedom to work through their stuff. We were supportive. We worked out. We walked. We moved. We coached. We grew. We had problems. We solved problems. Had a great time, and I had intended to be there for about 6 months, and about 6 weeks into this thing, that's when the opportunity to move to Mexico popped up. And at first it was hey man, come check this out. A call from my business partner from GS Nation at the time, and hey, come check this out. We had talked about this and parking lotted it, basically. Put it in the hey, 5 years down the road type thing, and
Right.
here the opportunity to take that big step, big leap, and just say yes and give it a go. So ended up moving to Mexico within 2 weeks from that, and we were making some real strides on uh, creating that life and that business that we were really looking to do down there. And COVID hit, so there were a couple big leaps, and frankly, that move to San Diego felt like the biggest one for me, because
Sure.
it was that first move away from home, even after a lot of traveling, even after coming back, or going to college and coming back. Like, I hadn't left since then. And so that was like okay, I'm out. I'm going to carve my path somewhere out here. And then that made the Mexico jump a little easier, because I just made a move like 6 weeks earlier, and I was living in a top bunk of with 3 other people in
Yeah.
this, little house. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go do the same thing, but in Mexico, and see what happens. And so it was an easy gamble at the time.
Right. And that group in Southern California, that was with Mike Bledsoe and the
Yeah.
coaches that would become Enlifted, right?
Some of them became Enlifted coaches. Most of them came from the strong coach stem. Mike Bledsoe was there. Danny Rios, Chris Marhefko was there. awesome people. I moved out there with Brian Muka, who spent some time in the Enlifted community, and he's now down in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Joy Walker. I mean, and we always had coaches come in and out, which was awesome. And so there were, because people wanted to be around Mike and Danny and Chris and all those guys and Ben, then it was a hub for people, and again, we were all in other than Mike, I think we were in relatively similar parts of our career, or except, maybe various stages, where it was all like a real things had expanded, and then the kind of the universe came in together in that moment, and we were all in that spot for 2 months, and then kind of expanded back out again. And it's really cool to catch up with those guys now and just see the evolution even in 2 years, 2.5 years, however long it's been.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to make like one last point about GS Nation. I think it's important to recognize that that business was not a failure. You grew a great community with GS Nation, and even though it was something you decided to not pursue further, when it got to that point, when you felt like it was ready for the next thing, you at least had that awareness of it was time to let it go, and that you were meant for something more. And I know for some people to make that decision, and I'm sure for you, especially, it was difficult to make that decision and to let that go so you could move on to something better that felt more in alignment with what you wanted to do next.
Yeah, and thank you for seeing that and bringing that up. And that is, if being totally honest with you, man, that is a story that I have only relatively recently been able to clear for myself, or have cleared. Is And even, when I say clear a story, what I mean by that is discharge most of or all of the emotional energy that would come up when a topic arises or a memory pops up, or something along those lines, right? So, the phrase GS Nation was a failure, you might have heard that big breath, right? Like that is a thought I had in my mind, and a story I ran in my mind for a long time, for 2.5 years, 2 years. And it took awareness, and then it took me the desire to want to go into that story, and then the space to have stepped away from it, and the time, and then the intention to go in there and see, okay, like, really, what was that? And having the broader understanding that there are no mistakes per se, there aren't failures per se, there are lessons and opportunities. And you're right, we were able to have a community that we had a really good time, and we brought fitness, and we made fitness fun and accessible for the folks who wanted to show up and do it. And it was rad, super super rad. So
Absolutely.
yeah, a
And
lot of
you,
good memories from that.
yeah, and you put a lot of time into that too, from its initial concept, when you were learning strength and conditioning at University of Richmond, after leaving your job in the financial services industry. That is like I think the beginning of your journey, but it probably has even further elements to that I don't even know about, that helped you to get to that decision. um and it's, I think, you've, based on my perspective, you've been cultivating that ability for all your life. And that is something I think it's a sense of resilience, and also a sense of awareness for um you know looking for that connection with people. And is that something that you would agree with?
Definitely. Resilience and grit and adaptability are traits that I very much want to embody, and hope to embody and do embody. And and that same time, that second thing you said is absolutely true as well. I'm there's always ebbs and flows. There's always the lefts and rights and ups and downs, right? But
Right.
being able to be resilient, to connect with people, um, I want to be able to make an impact, and I've worked scrubbing refrigerators and doing U-Haul trucks and doing selling this and doing that, and it doesn't feel nearly as good as getting in and talking to people and connecting with people and helping people to feel better about themselves and to then go on and make an impact in their world. And freedom and flexibility have always been really important to me, right? And honestly, there's this quote that came up today. I'm going to read it to you because it was so good and I saved it for this purpose.
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela: to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. And I saw that this afternoon, and that hit for me because, to me, freedom doesn't mean like win the lottery and now I'm living on a yacht and no one ever hears from Dave again, right? Down down in some island drinking pina coladas or something like that, right? Like that's not freedom to me. That wouldn't do it. That wouldn't feel like a life of significance, or like I was doing what I really was meant to do.
I remember when around the time that we met, you told me about one of your favorite quotes by Jocko Willink, and he says discipline equals freedom. Is that something you still agree with, like based on what you just told me with this quote?
I mean, so there are different ways to define freedom. Then I guess
Yeah.
right. There's different ways to define freedom, and ultimately, I think it means what does it mean to you in the moment, and what identifies or what do you identify with on the particular evolution of the journey that you're on, right? And at a certain time frame, like maybe yeah, absolutely, like that I needed that discipline, and I can still
Yeah.
use that discipline, and this is not me shying away from discipline in any way, shape, or form, but sometimes right before we got on the call, a dear friend of mine, Joe Lindley, tagged me in a post and mentioned that he had just come back from a trip to Kilimanjaro, and he had he's led this expedition up Kilimanjaro, and then he had a friend have a life or death situation. He had to lead the expedition off the mountain to save his friend's life, and this comes the summer after having two near-death experiences for himself on a cross-country, bicycle ride. And some of the advice that I gave him when he got back from the trip, a couple months after he got back from the trip, he was being very self-deprecating and beating himself up about not doing XYZ and not being disciplined and not having the pedal down. And, I said something to the effect of, man, like, give yourself some grace. You just had two harrowing experiences and spent 2 months of your life dedicated to this thing. And, it's no wonder that you don't feel 100% 2 months after the event. Like, give yourself some time and some rest. And so I think at various times, discipline is freedom could be that very answer. At other times, rest is freedom could be the answer.
Sure.
Freedom for other people.
Right. And discipline to take rest is also important too,
Totally.
as someone who's a pretty active person, I know that rest days are just as important as the training days where you're going as hard as you can. And I did a 50-mile bike ride the other day, and I knew I needed the rest day the day after. So you got to listen to your body, and sometimes your body will want to rest, sometimes it won't. And it just comes down to having that awareness and that mindfulness of giving your body what it needs in that particular moment. And I think story work plays into that too. Like, it's your physical body, but it's also your mental and emotional body. Hey guys, brief pause in the episode to tell you about some of the great businesses that support this podcast. First, we got Weight Train. Use code Evolved Podcast to get 10% off all weight train and Athleticity gym gear and apparel. No matter what you need for your workouts, they have the gear to help you get it done. And if you don't see something you want, email them at team@weighttrain.com and they will take your requests for new products. Visit Weight Train for all your gym gear needs. Next is True Nutrition. Use code Evolved Podcast to get 5% off all nutrition supplements. I'm personally a fan of their soy isolate vegan protein powder, available in a variety of flavors and strengths, from light to heavy. They also have non-vegan protein powders if that's not your thing. I personally recommend the cinnamon bun and toasted coconut flavors in the heavy strength, and I add them to waffles, oatmeal, protein shakes, and ice cream. They're delicious. Check out their wide range of supplements at affordable prices that are third-party tested and verified for content quality. They are able to provide such great prices because the supplements come direct from the manufacturer without any marketing gimmicks or fancy labels. Visit TrueNutrition.com to supplement your workouts and your nutrition. Last is Hate Brand Goods. Use code Evolved Podcast to get 15% off all Hate Brand clothing and accessories. Their goat shorts and shirts are the most comfortable clothing I've ever worn, and they have the coolest designs. However, their clothing drops are only available in limited quantities, so get your favorites while you can, and be on the lookout for other drops that you're stoked on. Visit thehate.com, spelled HVIII, for clothing to remind the world that you're not dead yet and you're ready to kick today in the dick. Back to the show. Prior to hearing what you do with Storywork and helping people reframe perspectives and the words that they use, obviously I'm familiar with the concept of Storywork, but it's usually in different terms, right? Like some type of talk therapy, or described in terms of changing your mindset. But we have seen this shift in perspectives on mental health in the past several years, with talking more about the stories that we tell ourselves. And I think that trend is definitely something worth talking about. So how did you initially find Storywork and that particular concept, and how did you choose to apply that to the work that you do?
Yeah, great question. So before I answer that directly, I think it's important to highlight a very distinct part of the conversation, and it's not something that I really realized until a couple of years ago. And I'll tell you when and how, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think we can understand fitness, right? We can quantify fitness. We can understand fitness when we see it, when it's on the page. Someone drops a 5-minute mile, they're fit. We can put someone on a Airdyne assault bike and for 10 minutes and see pretty straightforward how fit they are, right? And that's measurable, right? Same with health, right? And health is beyond surface deep. We can run blood work, lab work, and get a very clear picture on the internal health of the individual, right? It's very measurable, it's quantifiable, etc. Right? Wellness is not. Wellness is qualitative. Wellness is something that, unlike health and unlike fitness, can be felt and had in an instant. And wellness is the mind, right? How we feel about ourselves, what we say about ourselves, what we think about ourselves, our internal state. Are we in an upregulated sympathetic fight or flight state, or are we in a downregulated parasympathetic rest, relaxed state, right? And words, breath, and stories either get us in either one of those states or keep us in either one of those states. So the distinction between health, fitness, and wellness, I think, is very important. And I've only within the past 2.5 years begun to really understand wellness, where I've had a firm grasp on fitness for a long time. I've had health, been figuring out health over the past 5 years or so, and this final piece beyond mindset, beyond positivity, beyond talking out your feelings and whatnot, has been the story work piece, right? So the story work in this form I was introduced to in 2017. I had met Mark England, who I mentioned earlier in the podcast, the language guru from
Mm-hmm.
our hometown here. Uh, Met him at a networking event, and so happened to really be interested in what he had to say about language and words and stories. And he told a story himself about the word abracadabra, abracadabra, which if I ask you what, you may or may not know the story. And if I ask you what abracadabra, you know, what do you think of when you hear that word? What would you say?
Magic.
Every time. Every time. 99 times out of 100, I swear, people say magic, right? And there's a reason for that. Is it's known all over the world. It's an Aramaic term. It's a very, very old word. It's over 5,000 years old. And it means with my words I create, or with my words I influence. All right. Abracadabra, magic. With my words I influence. Right. So he starts spitting off about this stuff at a networking event, and I basically was like, man, I got to go meet this guy. And I need more than the old, hey, I liked your talk here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. And like, hey, I'm going to take you out to Thai food. Like, what's your favorite restaurant in Richmond? So we went out to Thai. We had 2 or 3, lunches or beers over the next 4, 5, 6 months, and started to enjoy hanging out with one another. And I was learning a lot from doing so. Uh, and on one of these experiences, I guess, for lack of a better term, just bitching about all the things that were wrong in my life. I was uh, had just left a 5, 6 year relationship, and I was still feeling some real angst from that. I was anticipating or thinking about leaving my 5, 6, 7 year financial planning career, and was experiencing a ton of angst in regards to that. And I had just signed up to run a 50-mile ultra marathon when the farthest I had ever run in my life was 15 miles. We were going to do it for charity.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point in my life, I knew there was no way I was going to be able to do that. And I was going to get hurt or quit and be the laughing stock of the town. Right. Those were the stories running through my head. Right. And the stuff that was
Right.
going. And Mark very nonchalantly just said, hey, man, why don't we I'm going to send you a Google Doc, man. Just fill it out. We'll get on a call next week and we'll talk about some stuff. And so, on the Google Doc were a couple prompts. What areas of your life are you feeling most confident in right now? What areas of your life are you feeling most stuck in right now? A couple other questions. And then, like he had a couple notes of, why don't you write out the story of the 50 miler, write out the story of, the breakup, and write out the story of uh, what if I leave my financial planning career? All right, answer that question. And I do some writing. I feel a little bit better. I get some clarity. Still got a ton of uncertainty. Still got a ton of stuckness. Still got a ton of feeling. This is stuff I had talked out with people, talked out with my friends, which is super valuable to have. But in some instances, I still feel alone in some of these things I hadn't voiced. Like I wasn't exactly telling everyone that I thought I was going to quit this race, and that I knew I wasn't going to do it. I had signed up and wanted to do it
Sure.
and raise some money at this point. So I'm not going to tell people there's no way I'm going to finish this thing. But hey, let's
You want
here's
to believe it's true. Yeah.
exactly. So uh, dude, we got on this call and 90 minutes, 2 hours go by. And by the end of the call, I had a story titled, written out, and had gone through a couple different steps to release a lot of those energy around the financial planning thing, the relationship thing. And I knew for a fact that I was going to finish that 50 miler and that it was going to be okay, because I'd really worked through a lot of the what if negative scenarios. And I had allowed myself the opportunity to ask, well, what if this goes right? Like, what if I pull this off? Like, what if you pull this off? 15 miles in your life, and now in a month and a half you run 50. That would be rad. And
I just want to put a pin in that real quick. So you were having all these negative thoughts about how things were going with your relationship, how you were feeling scared about doing this 50 miler and you thought you wouldn't be able to do it. And then Mark asked you these questions about how, like, what would happen, what's the worst case scenario, what's going wrong, and then he asked you to reframe it, right, in terms of what could go right, like what's your plan going to be to make it go right.
correct.
That's
And part of
correct.
that was one of the first times I had used a translation where I was so fixated, my reticular activating system was so dialed in on what could go wrong, all the things that could go wrong, plan for what could go wrong, this could go wrong. And then it was just like, well, look at it this way, like what could go
Right.
right? And it just burst open a world of possibilities, and I was able to lean into that energy and momentum.
Right. And what do you think was it that like helped you lean into that more? Like, how do you feel like you were already willing to accept that, or was that something that Mark had to pull out of you?
No, what's so cool about this process to me, and in my vast experience in doing this, it has been people heal themselves, right? It's almost like I got the flashlight, and they got to
Right.
just like, but it's, ooh, what about that? And they're like, right. And it, the relief came because I felt the relief happen. Right.
Mm,
Where over the course of these, the Storywork process, the 4-step method, like what we're able to do is I'm able to feel these various downshifts and have replied back and given feedback on how I'm feeling and what's going on and where I'm feeling it, and not only the feels, but like visceral things. Where's my heart rate? Like, where's my breathing pattern? What does this mean? What does that mean? Dive back into this story. Go type that story out, right? And really, what that opening up does is, allow fresh air in, allow stagnant air out, and really allowed me to look at things in a totally clear way, having felt both ends of the spectrum and understanding that really maybe for one of the first times, like really feeling how much words, like specific words, matter or mean or can impact.
so this is pre GS Nation,
Correct.
and it sounds like this opening, helped you with making that transition out of your old career and
Correct.
into what GS Nation would eventually become. Correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, because I have to learn things the hard way, I didn't look at it Enlifted again for the next year, and ended up going to a seminar with Mike Bledsoe, Brandon Powell, and Mark England. Brandon Powell is a master Wim Hof instructor. Went to that in 2018, and that was language, breath, ice, words, movement, etc. Super rad. Got to know those guys at Mark's family farmhouse afterwards for a long weekend, and then was able to help them kick off the Enlifted brand at a health and wellness festival in April of 2019 in Austin, Texas, called Paleo FX, which coincidentally enough is actually where I met my current partner and one of my very, very dear friends, Brooks Meadows, my current business partner now with Chop Club. So weird how everything happens for a reason, kind of looking back type stuff. But
Yeah, absolutely. And is Brooks part of Enlifted, or was he doing something else at Paleo FX?
so he was there to meet Mike Bledsoe, believe it or not.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
and I was there with Brian Muka to help Mike and Mark and the Enlifted crew launch Enlifted at this event. And
Right.
so yeah, we met Brooks in the parking lot of the convention center walking in, and he was walking with a purpose, and we were walking with a purpose, and we were like, "Hey, what's going on, man?" And he's like, "Hey, I'm here to. Name's Brooks from Memphis, Tennessee, yada yada yada, and I'm here to meet Mike Bledsoe." And we're like, No shit, buddy. Well, come with us. So we'll walk you right to him. So that was very serendipitous, if you believe that.
Yeah. And then you connected with Brooks on a personal level and you decided to go into business together. Can you talk a little bit about how that relationship developed between you two?
Yeah, and that's a super fun story as well. We connected there in Paleo FX. We reconnected at the Strong Coach Summit in San Diego in April of 2019. So that was the thing that sparked me to actually move to San Diego. Was that a summit a couple months earlier? I reconnected with Brooks and I believe his partner Hallie was there, or his wife Hallie was there at the time. Um, we hopped on a podcast together. What else did we do? We were just kind of running in similar circles. I know Brian Muka and I stayed at his house, driving across the country to move out to San Diego. So we slept on his floor, got woken up by his two dogs in Memphis, Tennessee, on the cross country trip. So we had been kind of building this relationship from afar through coaching and through our mutual friend network. And his wife Hallie, and this is actually really interesting because this is the exact 1 year anniversary of this. So this is how quickly things can move. So his wife Hallie, about 2 weeks prior to this, so 1 year and 2 weeks ago, sends me a message on Instagram and asks, do I know of any fun Spartan races coming up for Brooks's birthday that he might be able to do? And sure enough, in 2 weeks' time, so exactly a year ago, I was about to run the Spartan Beast, which is a half marathon with like 30 obstacles in the mountains of West Virginia. And me, being a devious little bastard, sent Hallie the link to the Beast for Brooks to do because I was camping with some buddies that weekend. Thought it would be rad to have him join. We were with the
Yeah.
Kenneth crew, Vincent and Kay, and my partner Ruslana and a couple other people were coming out. So hey man, come on out. So Hallie signed Brooks up unbeknownst. He wasn't running or really training at this particular time, just doing
Oh my
his
gosh.
general fitness routine. And he came in, hopped in. I geared him up. I've got duplicates of everything he would need. So he had, OCR shoes and the right gear, and he had the backpack, and he was ready to rock, and he had a great attitude. We rocked and rolled. Just had a great time. Like I picked him up from the airport. We stayed at the house, drove out there together, camped for 3 days, ran the race, came back. And it was the morning before I took him back to the airport. He was talking about potentially wanting to move. And I've got a hot bat or a hot tub here at my place in Lakeside with a chest freezer next to it that I use as a cold tub for contrast therapy, cold and
Mhm.
heat immersion back and forth. So we did like 5 rounds of that with some breath work in between and feeling great, dude. Like the day after the race. And, he's leaning on one side and I'm leaning on the other. And I hit him with the old, man, if you moved here, we could do this pretty much every day. And he was like, oh, fuck, you're right. And went back, talked to his wife about it. They actually came and flew back to Richmond like the next week, maybe the week after that, and stayed at Ruslana and I's place while we took a trip of our own. Uh, Checked out the town, fell in love with it, and they were in town less than a month later. Like 30 days later, they had moved, and they moved less than a mile away from us. They're 0.99 miles away from my front door to his back garage where the dojo is. So,
Wow.
and initially he had decided he wanted to move from a new community, more support. We've got a fair amount of people in the Enlifted community and in our mutual friend network here in Richmond. And around January, we were doing a bunch of work together in a co-working space, startup Virginia here in town. And like for 2 or 3 straight days in a row, we're like working on the same whiteboard. He was on the left side and I was on the right side. And we're both doing like client avatars of the exact clients that we'd like to work with and landing on executive men and, and getting in with corporate wellness. And, we're like, oh, okay. And then we're like, well, what would it look like if we worked together? And we explored that for a little bit and ultimately decided that it would look freaking awesome. And so we it would look a lot like More of the Same, which we were having a really good time doing it. And we felt with our various expertises and his ability to integrate things and to really be a doer and like in the dirt guy and analytical, and my ability to be very 30,000 foot view, idea generating, energy generating, and kind of that momentum generating kind of presence. Uh, he wanted to coach less. I wanted to coach more. He wanted to do more of the back end stuff. I didn't want to do any of the back end stuff, and it just fit like a glove, man. So personality wise and otherwise. So, um, he is going through level 1 right now, actually, to be long-winded to answer your question, but he is actually going through Enlifted level 1 now. Um, there are 3 levels of Enlifted certs, and it takes a full year if you're going to run them back to back to back to go through all 3. But yeah, he's a long time coach, owned multiple CrossFit gyms, got his MBA from school in Korea. Just been in the game a long time, and a great movement coach as well, very heart forward, heart centered, and it was a great match. So when those worlds collided and aligned, it all came together, man. Similar to
That's
how
cool.
Storywork.
I didn't realize he was already living in Richmond. I thought he might have been in California.
Yeah, well, he was originally from Memphis.
Okay, yeah.
He and his wife moved about 11 months ago from Memphis to Richmond.
Okay. I hope he likes it.
He loves it. He loves it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
They've
great.
already re-upped on their lease, so we got him at least for another year. So.
Awesome. And the business you guys have together, what is that called again?
So we work with executive men in 2 different capacities. So we've got a men's health mastery program where that's actually for executive and professional men. So I would put myself in the professional men category versus the executive men category at this particular point in my career and life. And that is a business where it's a year-long health mastery program. So we help men master their health in less than a year without sacrificing work or family time, which for professional and executive men are very, very important. We get that and we know that. So that looks like education masterclasses. That looks like daily accountability. That looks like a lot of tools, tips, resources. That looks like a monthly group community call. And that looks like multiple one-on-one coaching sessions for our mastery level, executive level guys. And those are, multiple sessions per month with me. And we're going through stories, we're going through habits, we're going through integrating the things that we learn each month in the wellness topics, et cetera, et cetera. What we found was a lot of these executive guys that we were starting to work with and have been working with own companies, and they liked what we were doing, and it was really working because Brooks and I really put a ton of energies and efforts into it on the prepping of like creating this thing, but then we've underthought the delivery of it, and that cool, here are the roles, show up and do them, and let's have so much fun doing it. And so the calls, we have so much fun doing it. We're showing up, having a good time, delivering great information, making an impact. And a couple of these guys began inquiring about, well, what would it look like if we brought this in at scale in our companies? And so we shifted in some capacity, in that we shifted our time and energy a little bit off to the side from our original brand of Chop Club for Men. Serious Fun Wellness is our corporate side, and we are working with companies to help bring real wellness solutions to the modern workplace. And remember, going back to the distinction between health and fitness and wellness, most corporate quote wellness programs are gym subsidy programs, tech apps. I know I tried to build one with GS Nation and solve that particular problem, and don't actually get to the root cause of the issue, which is just serious unwellness. It's burnout. It's mental health in the decline, and it's just COVID did a number on folks on top of everything else going on. And so there aren't many strategies for companies to really get to the root cause of these things without having it look like they're just trying to affect the bottom line, or having to spend like obscene amounts of money to do so. So we realized our model for Chop Club with some tweaks could work very well in the corporate setting, and that's what we found.
So your Storywork clients that you were doing before you guys set up the Chop Club, have those clients been integrated into that system, or are you still working with people individually as well?
Yeah, great question. I've still got 7, 8 individual clients right now, and that is still ongoing and remains. And it's really funny because one client, 79-year-old woman. I've got a 73-year-old woman, female client. I've got a 62-year-old female client. I've got 2 50-year-old men clients, and I've got a 27-year-old and a 23-year-old dudes right now. And so it's a real broad stroke and spectrum.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is that Storywork, is it's applicable across the board. It's applicable across spectrums, and the janitor to the CEO to the 16-year-old to the 96-year-old. Like, we all talk to ourselves. We all think. We all breathe. We all speak. We all create these stories in our head about ourselves and about our world. And some of them are true and some of them aren't, and some of them help us and some of them hurt us, and some of them are automatic and some of them we can take back and start to take control of. And like, it's that magic wand, it's that abracadabra that is so powerful for me right now, and is so generating for me right now as well in the work that I'm doing.
So, Dave, I think you might be the first person who ever introduced me the concept of knowing what your why is. For me, I have a lot of whys as far as, like, it depends on what I'm doing, whether that's trying to be healthier and build more strength, have a better diet, do this creative work that I do. It's to give me the life that I want, the life that I know I deserve, and the life that gives me a sense of purpose, something I can be proud of. But what is your why for your life right now, for doing your Storywork business, for creating these other businesses for men, to help them be better in their personal and professional lives? Like, what is the reason you get up every day and keep doing this?
Yeah, I mean, it's without passion or purpose or a why, life isn't nearly as full, or not life isn't nearly as enjoyable, and certainly not as impactful, in my opinion. So right now, and what it's been for a long time, is freedom, flexibility, and impact. And having and building a life where I can create that freedom and flexibility, not only for myself, but for my family and for my friends and the squad. First one to make it leaves ladder down. That's the rule. So I would be thrilled to be able to leave ladders down to the people who have helped me out along the way, and the people that I really love and care about. And that means a lot to me. And then the ability to spend my time doing the things that are impactful to me. And so the more freedom and flexibility I find that I have, the more I am liable and likely to give back in really meaningful ways to me. And if I'm saying yes to things that don't allow me to say yes to those freedoms and flexibilities and impact desires, then I'm often moving away from my real why. And it's taken 34 and a half years to figure that out, and I don't always say yes or no in the right times, and it's getting I'm now very aware of that, and I have a good why, and I have a good reason, and I'm applying those lessons more frequently. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. And you mentioned before that you do Spartan races, and you've done a 50-mile race as well as many other races. Are you currently training for any other races? Is that still part of your life these days?
So up until this year, it was, very, very much so. I had intended it to be this year, and the first race I ran this year was in Austin, and I either had COVID when I ran it or got COVID shortly thereafter, and it sidelined me for a while. And
Mhm.
I used that as a nice, convenient excuse at the time to put my energies and efforts on other things, which has coincided very well with the growth of these multiple businesses. So actually yesterday I just ran a super, so the half of that beast. So it was a 10K. It ended up being about 7 miles in West Virginia, 20 some obstacles in the mountains. Did that yesterday. So like the year anniversary of the beast. And it was a nice kick in the rear, and it was fun. And it was the first race I had ran in a long time that I ran intentionally solely to have fun and not to compete and not to race for time. I didn't even sign up for the competitive division because I knew what would happen if I did. So we signed up for the fun division, and that's what we did. We had fun. And so it was a nice Kickstarter. So nothing on the books, giving myself the grace and the rest period right now to focus on some of the professional things that I'm really desiring to expand right now, but still maintaining a decent movement practice and uh, looking to get back into it.
That's good.
2023.
So, what does your movement practice look like these days?
I'm doing a lot of ground-based work. I'm doing a lot of floor work. A lot of kind of rolling and crawling, for lack of better terms. Just
Hmm.
trying to get my back feeling loosey goosey. Also doing more body weight stuff. So I just hadn't really done any push-ups in however freaking long I could remember.
Right.
Like, stopped going to the climbing gym. So it had been 4 or 5 months since I've done a pull up, and so it's like, all right, let's get back to basics here. Let's
Uh,
let's start to just be consistent in what we're doing and get in there when we feel good. And so it's a lot of walks. It's a lot it's actually been a lot of biking as well. I got a bike back in April. I've been really enjoying that. So
Sweet.
saw you or mentioned your 50 miler, so we'll have to get out and ride.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. What kind of bike do you got?
I've got a gravel bike, so I found I desired an in between that mountain and that road. So I lucked
Yeah.
out. I've got a friend who's super into bikes, like has 10 bikes, and it's always biking weather no matter what. And he
Uh-huh.
sent this particular bike, which I couldn't tell you the name of if you threatened to kill me unless I did, but um, great deal on Craigslist. It was owned by a bike mechanic who worked in one of the bike shops in Richmond, and he was moving and needed to get rid of it. And it just was a great find. It's been a great bike. It's been in the shop twice because I've been riding it hard, but
Good
luckily
stuff, man.
I'm unscathed so far. So that's good.
Well, yeah, I got a gravel bike earlier this year and I love it. We'll
It's so
definitely
fun.
have to get out on the trails. It's so much fun. Yeah.
I've got a group that rides. It's called Bike Buds.
Oh
It's
yeah, I haven't ridden with that group, but I have ridden with Phil,
yeah,
who's
yeah, yeah.
one of the leaders of it. Super great guy. We do Broad Street Bullies together, and he sometimes comes out to other rides that I've done. Super nice guy, and I've heard they're a really good group to ride with.
It's
Um,
it's a lot of fun. Every Tuesday night in Richmond, 7 p.m. if you're listening. So
yeah, are you going tomorrow?
I am. Yeah, I am. Let's do
Sick.
it. Let's ride.
Well, yeah, after I finish recording the episodes of this podcast, I'm definitely going to try and make it out. So maybe I'll see you out there.
Nice.
Do you have any habits that you practice that help you to stay productive, remember new ideas, or add value to your life? And if so, what are they?
Man, that's a great question. Lot of habits. I'm the healthy habit guy, so that's
Yeah.
that's loaded. I'll try to. I'll give you my favorite one right now, and it's going to be counterintuitive to a lot of people, but it's going outside and sticking my feet in the grass in the garden, and that is really, in as it says in the name, it's very grounding. It allows me to really balance my energy levels out, to get a lot of that buzz and fuzz out of my head, and to have that quiet contemplative time because I don't have a meditative practice in the sit down and cross your legs and close your eyes and be quiet sense. So my
Hmm.
meditative practice is often done while walking or while gardening, just kind of being out in nature, looking at stuff, moving this, digging up that, et cetera, et cetera. So, um, on top of that, I use red lights almost exclusively at night. I'm a cold tub guy once or twice a week. Had a near daily movement practice for the past 6 years. Do lots of walks. Um, Write stuff down, and I don't do that enough, to be quite honest. Like, I've got multiple journals here that have a couple pages filled in each of them here, like half a notebook filled there, but there's a lot that writing can do to help us feel better about ourselves and to get a lot of clarity, like space and clarity. And that's what nature does. That's what the walks do, and that's what writing does. So
Right. And writing is an integral piece of story work, correct?
correct, correct,
Can
absolutely.
you just expand upon that? Like why writing is so important for the story work practice?
Journaling, writing, most of us feel better when we do that, and yet only about 3% of people even have written goals. It's from an ongoing 30 plus years study at Harvard. 3% of people have written goals. Most people don't write down their fears. Most people don't write down, their perfect days. Most people don't write down the things that they're they feel stuck in, or that hurts them or haunts them even, and when we do, we get those. Not only do we get it out of our head, so we take this story that's a bunch of just blah 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 blah, just a bunch of random thoughts and strings and loops and etc., static white noise. We get that out of our head, and it takes us out of our story. So now we can kind of look at it like it's on the movie screen and it's
Mhm.
playing as a memory, but we're able to see it and read it, as opposed to it just being in our head. So that's a huge piece to this. Therapy is wonderful. Therapy works for a lot of people. So does, medication can work for people, as well. But for the 50% of people that therapy doesn't work for, or the more than that the medication doesn't work for, or for people who are looking to uh, gain some of that space and clarity so that they can get creative and change narratives like really quickly, it's the best work I've ever found, because we can take any story, anything that can be written down and titled, we can four step, right? We can work through this process, right? Where we write a story down, we read it out loud, we slow down the read, and then we insert some strategic breaths, and it ain't rocket science, and it is wildly proficient and effective.
What's an obstacle that you're currently facing or recently faced, and what practices do you use to cope with it?
I mean, this is something that I think a lot of us face at various points in time. It's just general life apathy. I'm just a blah, and
Yeah.
like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Nothing seems to be going
The
well.
existential dread.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
I had a nice ebb of that, and I think part of it for me is realizing that it ain't all sunshine and roses, and that there are ebbs and flows, and that's okay, and just to ride out the wave I was on, while also understanding that there are a lot of things within my control that maybe I had let slip, as far as eating habits go, or movement practices go, or sleep rhythms go, or substance use goes, or like whatever it is that could be greatly contributing to this general life apathy and feelings of blah. And so, getting a grip on those, changing those habits and patterns, allowing the process to play itself out, and then grounding, finding nature, taking a trip. That's what ended up getting me out of it, was a road trip I took with my partner, where we got out into space, and we created that space and that distance, and I allowed myself to downshift, and then leaning back into those whys. When I came back, it was pedal to the metal on a couple opportunities that Brooks and Brooks and I had for our corporate work, and so it's been very energizing to work hard on something that I really want to do, that I know is very impactful. It checks off a lot of those boxes.
Yeah. And traveling is so important too, because, if you have the luxury to do that, it can give you that fresh perspective that you so desperately need. And, even just taking time away, if you're at home, taking a break from the work, even if it's for an hour or a day, it just frees up more mental capacity to re-engage with those whys, like you spoke to, with more energy. And you know there might be something that you didn't consider because you were just in it. um Taking time away is important for sure. Yeah. So we're going to move towards wrapping up. I have a few recurring segments on the podcast that I like to cover before we close out, starting with our mindset moment. What is a quote or tip that you use that inspires you to keep going despite personal hardships?
Charles Bukowski, if you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, maybe your mind. This could mean derision, mockery, isolation. Isolation is the gift. All the others are a test of your endurance, of how much you really want to do it. And you'll do it, despite rejection and the worst odds, and it will be better than anything else you can imagine. Do it. Do it. Go all the way. You will ride life straight to perfect laughter. It's the only good fight there is.
Do you remember where you were at in your life when you heard that quote for the first time?
When I moved to San Diego, I committed to walking 20,000 steps a day in January, which is a lot of freaking steps, right? A lot of steps. And it worked out because the time difference, and obviously I was by the beach, and so I was doing a lot of, just nighttime beach walking, and there was a little nature preserve there, but I was just out on my own, alone, a lot. And I was on YouTube. A lot of it was in the dark, right? A lot of it was, in my own thoughts, in my own head, working through, what had happened with, relatively recent relationships that had gone, a different way than I had hoped and planned. GS Nation kind of falling apart, having this back injury, like just working through a bunch of stuff. And this poem I put on repeat over and over and over and over again on those walks, along with many others. And, it was a very, very inspiring piece for me. And it has been for a lot of people that I've worked with, just go all the way, right? Like there is no other feeling other than that. Like if it works out or doesn't, I know that Mexico can't be a failure because I went all the way. I moved to another country. I swung the bat as hard as I could, and here we are. So
Yeah.
I went all the way, and thus I have zero regrets with that. And so there's, if we can, the more often we can do that, the more often we can go all the way and really lean into the yes that we feel in our heart and gut and soul, then we win.
Right on, man. Next up is PMA Warrior of the Week. Who is someone who inspires you to keep a positive mental attitude?
Definitely my partner, Ruslana. Rue is such an incredible woman. She's an entrepreneur. She's a longtime scientist. She's writing a book right now. She got a book deal for her first book, which is super cool. She's got a manuscript due in November, and she is just continually and eternally the most positive person and shines and exudes light and love even when things are super tough. She's had her own trials and tribulations, and a lot of those hurtful, stuck type things that we experience in our lives, she too has experienced, and she hasn't let it define her. And in fact, she's let it fuel her for the positive and for the good and for the benefit of herself and her community. So she is definitely my biggest inspiration with that.
Does she still work as the owner of Pulp Fiction. Is that business still happening?
So she ran that for the first year after COVID. So she was up all through 2020 and the beginning part of 2021, and then she decided to shift out of that to go back into her corporate role in the pharmaceutical industry for about another 6 months, and then left that at the beginning of January to be full time in her book writing process. So
Sweet. And what is the focus of her book?
So her book is called The Evolution of Healing, and it's about the 12 strands of DNA. And so basically, her book is going to be examining the ways that we can evolve our own DNA and our own genetic encoding through a lot of techniques, right? And that DNA isn't merely two strands. It's a lot more complex than that. So she's got a very unique perspective on that, being trained in the Western pharmaceutical medicine world, but then also having extensive knowledge in Ayurvedic, Eastern medicine culture, and a lot of different sound healing and meditation and movement practice and various Eastern world stuff. So it's a real mesh of those two different worlds when it comes to this particular topic.
Very cool. I would definitely love to talk with her about that.
Awesome. I'll link y'all after this.
Last thing is good food, good mood. What's one of your go-to meals that helps you to feel your best?
I make an incredible bone broth, which I think is key for everything, and I do a daily healthy smoothie. So, which would you prefer to hear about?
Your call, man.
All right, I'm gonna hit you with the smoothie because I think a lot of people make their smoothies. Wouldn't say wrong. Wrong is a strong word for this, and I think maybe a better phrase would. A lot of people have a lot that could be desired in their smoothies, right? Leave a lot on the table. So the idea with these things is to make it as nutrient dense as possible. So in lieu of almond milk, a handful of spinach, some protein powder, and a banana, which is what I hear a lot of smoothies are made of, right? I'm going to load up with healthy fruit. I'm going to load up with good berries, cherries, blueberries, lots of good antioxidants. I'm going to load up on healthy nuts and seeds. So pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, Brazil nuts. I'm going to do good healthy protein like collagen protein. I'm going to add in a bunch of superfoods like adaptogens and things like cacao and various mushroom blends. I'm going to might add in some honey. What else am I throwing in? Throwing in some figs, throwing in some dates. This thing is loaded and it's delicious and it fuels, gives the bodies the macronutrients that we need as far as protein, carbs, and fat. And then most importantly, gives the body the hydration and the micronutrients it needs in the forms of vitamins and minerals. And I feel freaking awesome when I'm doing one of those every day.
And what size blender are you working with here? Like, how do you fit that all in?
It's not a Vitamix, but it's a Vitamix style. I think it's a Hamilton Beach. And it ends up being like 30 to 40 ounces. So it's like
Okay.
good 1.5 cups. Like,
Nice.
and I'm not little cups. So I would say like it's a solid serving. This
Yeah,
is going to
yeah.
replace a meal. This is a meal and a half, but it's a meal and a half of stuff that's going to make you feel like you ate two in the best way possible.
Love it.
It's a terrible description.
Well, thanks again, Dave. Where can people connect with you if they want to follow along with you on your journey, whether that's your personal brand or Enlifted or Shop Club? We'll include all those links in the descriptions, but where can people connect with you easiest?
Awesome, man. I am on Instagram at daverobinson.coach. Very approachable there. I'm also at workyourstories.com. So my website is workyourstories.com for Storywork, and Chop Club for Men for our men's health mastery coaching. I'm also the co-host of the Get Enlifted podcast. So if you would like to learn more about Enlifted, about this language coaching system and how to work your own stories, then check out the Enlifted podcast. We have got 70 some episodes up roundabout of rad content over there. So lots of fun places to get more of Dave.
Right on. Thanks again, Dave. Great chatting with you. And I really appreciate you being on this show and sharing your story. Your story work for yourself is so beneficial for so many other people. And it's really a gift. So again, thank you.
Thank you for having me on, Joe. It's been super cool to see your evolution and you work on yourself over the past 5-6 years as well, just in the brief time that we have known one another. So thank you for having me on, and dude, keep going, go all the way. It's super rad to see.
Oh yeah. I'll see you out on those bike trails.
Let's do it, man. Talk soon.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out our podcast. I hope you got a lot out of it and it was helpful for you in your personal growth journey. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please do so on your preferred podcast provider. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Stay blessed and keep the PMA. Later.